Folks, welcome to Vintage Baseball Reflections. I am Tom, the baseball nostalgia guy, bringing you these treasured pieces. Do you miss the good old days of listening to baseball through radios? It was a classic pastime that stood for decades and shaped how we cherish baseball and our heroes. These stories are from a moment in time that were heard by fans just like you. They are uncut, unfiltered, simply here for you to enjoy. So I just want you to enjoy this reflection on baseball history. If you enjoy the podcast, please help me out and do one of three things. Follow, subscribe this podcast, and leave a review. It really helps. Share us with your baseball friends. Let them know about us. Or jump over to members.thisdayinbaseball.com. Join our email list, community, and our family of baseball podcasts.
That must have brought back a lot of memories.
Oh, it did, because especially Billy. 1932, boy, you've really got a collection.
Well, there you go back to about 1920, so you can see some of the others here. You're in all of these that I got out. Not this is the only one with a front page picture like that.
Well, that's probably scared all the other guys.
And then you made the front page.
Yeah. That must have been when I got married. What year is it? No, 48,
That's the
God
last
knows.
one. I think you talked about going with Wilson there. Yeah, you're still making jokes now. You're a serious businessman.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when I went to work for Wilson, 48. I can never remember whether it was 48 or 49. All I remember was the first meeting. It was the year that the Braves played Cleveland. So with that, 48. That was the big thing they had when Feller picked the guy off a second or something.
And who was the umpire that blew the call?
I don't know what it was.
Stewart. I knew it began with an S, but I couldn't remember.
Bill Stewart. He used to be a left-handed pitcher when he played, and he was a hockey referee also.
Hockey. And then he later coached the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, that's the same guy.
So, did you add your name to this board, please?
Tip of death to
You got a bunch of Hall of Famers on there.
Hey, no, Mickey can't remember when he got this ball, what year it was.
But it was at some All-Star game, I think, and all these fellows were there, you know. And,
Well, on the ball. Which ball? This one?
Yeah, well, yeah. Mickey gave it.
Mickey Vernon.
I mean the Dodgers.
Oh, no, that's race baseball.
Well, if you excuse me, I'm going to the store.
Okay.
Isn't that Musio?
There's no wife here to interview.
Oh,
when
no.
he goes out
George.
to interviews, I always get the wife in the kitchen. You'd be surprised how much I learned from the wives.
George
Yeah, they have an
Sisler.
entirely different outlook.
Jess Haynes didn't
Quite
talk
amazing.
much, but his wife
Oh,
was
his
wonderful.
wife was terrific.
Ernie Banks. That's not too long ago.
No.
Joe McCarthy's housekeeper told me a lot, too.
I was over to Buffalo last sometime. I got it in my book. I haven't got my. No, that's all right. I'll put it right here. And Joe, when they unveiled the plaque over there, not too long ago, and then Al just said when he talked to the office to call Vince McNamara, that I should call Vince McNamara. See, Vince is president of the New York Penn League. He was a guy who was a great pitcher, too. Bobo. Buck Newsom. I remember one year when he was telling us he held out. He won 20 games with the St. Louis Browns, and he told the general manager, I won 20 games with the last place club, and the general manager says, yeah, and we'd have finished last without you, too.
That was last 20 also, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you a few questions here then?
Sure, I'd be glad to.
I was very interested reading over this material here about you in these different newspapers, that your mother was Irish and your father Spanish, and how The story I got in one of these was that your mother was actually born in Northern Ireland and your father in Madrid. Now that's
No, my mother was born in California, and my father was born in California, but my mother's mother was born in County Cork, Ireland. And my father's grandmother was born in Madrid, his great-grandmother. And then his mother was born in California, and then and then there was one grandmother born in Mexico, and so I'm a little bit of everything, I guess.
Yeah. Did they? How did they happen to get together? They both living in the same general area, your parents?
My mother and father?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they were living in California, and my mother spent some time in Kansas, and then moved back to California. And my dad, well, he was in the drayage business. He had horses, and we had a dairy farm, too, in California. And as a kid, I milked cows and everything else, going to school after that.
Was were the father Catholic and your mother Protestant? Or?
No, they were both Catholics.
Oh, that was another misinterpretation of the papers there. I thought they said you were so.
No, they were both Catholics, and
you're born in Rodeo,
California, Rodeo, whatever.
And that's in the Bay Area?
That's in the Bay Area. It's not far from well, it's about halfway between Oakland and Sacramento. Not that far, but it's right near Richmond and Mare Island, Navy Yard, or Vallejo, right in that section. I'm about 40 minutes from up in the wine country, and that's it.
Did your dad play ball?
No. I had one brother that played ball, and that was all.
Professionally?
No, semi-pro. And
how'd you happen to break in?
Well, like any other kid, you play ball all the time, and just one of those things. I was very, very lucky. You play sandlot ball, grammar school ball, high school ball, and
did
then
high school have a team?
Yeah, Richmond. That's why I went to Richmond, California. I used to take the train every morning. It was about a 40-minute ride on the train, and Rodeo was so small it didn't have any any high school. It was either Crockett and Crockett didn't have much in the line of baseball, and I went to Richmond High, and when I was pitching for the Richmond High School team, the San Francisco Seals took me up to spring training in Boys Springs, which is right up in the wine country, and I got out of school for a couple of weeks and I went back to school, and they, just being around guys like Lefty O'Doul and Hollis Thurston and fellows like that, they were all the big stars, Jimmy Cavaney, Babe Pinelli, and players like that who had played. In fact, Pinelli had played, and so did Jim Cavaney, played for Cincinnati in the World Series, in the National League many, many years ago. And so I just...
You signed with them, did you, or...?
I signed with the Seals, yeah. And the first year, I signed with the Seals in 28.
I see.
And they
sent... through high school by now.
Yeah. And they sent me to what was then known as the Utah and Idaho League, which is now the Pioneer League, a Class A league.
Yeah, your record.
And
Salt Lake City?
That's right. Yeah. In the old Pioneer League. Mm-hmm. No, the old Utah and Idaho League. See, there was Utah was Salt Lake City and Ogden, Utah, and Pocatello, Idaho, Twin Falls, Idaho, Boise, Idaho, Twin Falls, and Idaho Falls. And that's why it was Utah and Idaho League. And then that was in 28. And then in 29, I joined the big club, the San Francisco Seals, in the Coast League. And
who was their manager?
Nick Williams then. And they had, on that club there was Johnson, Averill, Jolly, Frankie Crissetti, Gus Sewer, Thurston, and myself came back to the big leagues. And
must have won the title.
And Kurt Davis. And Johnson went to Detroit. Jolly went to Chicago White Sox. Averill went to Cleveland Indians. Gus Seward went to, he was a second baseman in the Coast League. He went to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and at Pittsburgh he played first base. Crissetti went with the Yankees, but he didn't report for another year. Kurt Davis, I believe he went with the Cubs. He became a 20-game winner more in the big league. And I went to the Yankees.
I've often heard said that the Coast League in those days was really almost a major league. It was good talent out there, wasn't it?
Well, I would say yes, for the particular reason that, see, the Coast League had just enough other guys coming back from the big leagues that had pretty good careers and great careers in the big leagues, and they were still playing ball. And the Coast League in those days was more or less of independently owned clubs, and so they seemed to gel. And Ed Coleman, I can name so many of the fellows that came out of that league then and into the big leagues. And yes, it was a good league. It was a good league. And then also the American Association. Well, they're good leagues yet. I don't mean that, but they had. And they went in for developing a lot of young fellas, and Larry and Reese and Buzz Arlett and all those fellas came up from the Coast League. And of course, Mickey Cochran was a couple of years ahead of me, but he played for Portland in the Coast League. And
what did your parents think about you going into professional baseball? They have any feelings about this?
No, they didn't say anything about it.
Pleased?
Of course, my mother and father never did see me win a ball game, but they only saw me pitch about once. They weren't baseball fans. And I brought them back in, I believe it was 1934 to New York. And the year I won 26 and lost 5. And 2 of the 5 that I lost, they saw me lose. And then they went up to Boston to visit my wife's mother. And they stayed up there, and I took them down, put them on the train the day they went to Boston. I pitched that afternoon and won. So they never did see me win a ball game.
Did they have any other plans for you as a young man to go into any?
I guess be a farmer, being born and raised on a dairy farm.
How'd you feel about it, playing?
Well, there was 2 things I wanted to do. I didn't want to be baseball first, but I wanted to learn how to fly. And you go back in those years, airplanes. I remember that after the war, they would come barnstorming guys, you know. And so I believe in that other book that we were looking at. One of the hobbies was aviation, I think, in this particular book here.
You like to see planes when they came overhead while you're pitching?
Oh, yeah, but I mean, that's one of those things, you know.
Those classic stories.
Yeah. But it actually happened, and so they remember more about that than any game I pitched, I think.
Was that kind of unconscious or subconscious?
It was just one of those things, any more than a guy will take time out to tie a shoe that's already tied or something like that, you know. And so I just, why, I don't know. That's what I liked aviation. And he was flying pretty low over the polo ground.
Did you learn to fly?
Yes, I learned to fly. I never soloed, but I learned to fly.
It was really a rare activity in those days back in the...
Yeah, does it mention it in any of the write-ups like there? No, no, but I know it does in this particular book.
This has just got the bare statistics in here. So.
Yeah.
So you had a good year with the Seals. Did they win the league title in 29 there?
No.
With all that talent?
Well, you know, Jolly, Averill, and Johnson were sold. And then, and Gus Seward, Crissetti, and Davis and I were sold. They were sold just a year to report for the next year.
Averill came up in 29.
No, and that one, in the Utah-Idaho League, I think I led the league in strikeouts, and it's the only time in my life I didn't pitch 500 ball, I believe.
12 and 14.
Yeah, and I led the league in strikeouts, too, I believe. Earned runs. I don't believe I know. I rememberize those.
Speed Jolly was gone and you came up the Seals?
No. He was still there, but in 28, they sold him at the end of 28, and I came in 29.
Any Smead Jolly stories?
No, he was a great hitter. He was a real good hitter, and they tried to make a catcher out of him. And I believe in Fenway Park. They used to have a bank in left field in Fenway Park, and Donnie Bush was managing the White Sox, I believe, at the time. And they went in to play Fenway Park, and you know the way to do is run up the bank and get against the wall and wait, and then the wind. They always talk about the east wind in Boston, you know, and that would blow the ball back, and old Snead got up there, and the ball started drifting back, and he's leaning out, and he come tumbling down off the thing, and the manager got angry with him and said, Snead told him it was all your fault, and the manager said, why? He said, you taught me how to go up the bank, but didn't teach me how to come down it, so.
So, in 30 you were so the Yankees. How did that...
They bought me in 1929.
I see.
They bought me in 1929. I reported in 30. And I think
that was a big thrill, I expect.
Oh, it was. 2 and 5. I think I won 2 and lost 5. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle of the year, they sent me to, St. Paul. Well, and I believe it was either 8 and 4 or 6 and 4.
Very good, 8 and 4, yeah. So you went to spring training in 30 with the Yankees?
Yes, sir.
At St. Pete, was it?
Yeah.
How did the old timers treat you down there? And how did you just, the story about how they're tough on young rookies?
No, they didn't have anything to say to you down there then. The greatest guy, I still say this, one of the greatest men I ever met in my life was the late Herb Pennock. He sort of took me under his wing right down there then, but Wade Hoyt was with him then, and all those fellas, and Wade and I became very, very friendly, but I'll never forget the first time I ever met Wade Hoyt. In the first place, I was on a train about 7 days going from California to St. Petersburg, Florida. And Eddie Bennett, our bat boy then, and he took me in the dining room, and Hoyt was sitting there reading the newspaper and the sports sheet, and Eddie says, Wade, I want you to meet the new left-hander we just bought from the Coast League, Lefty Gomez. And he didn't even look at me. He said, I meet the Bushers out at the ballpark. I could have crawled under the table. And later on became real good friends, and up until this day. And he broadcasted here at Cincinnati for over 20 years, didn't he? And I heard a lot of people tell me that they used to love when it got rained out because he used to tell all those fabulous stories about
the photograph record of those rain-out broadcasts. It doesn't have it in there. It's just a few of them. But he did it for so many and rich stories he told. And he could describe things so well, and get all the drama. It was beautiful.
Well, Wade went into vaudeville. He played vaudeville. Wade was a real good singer, and he sang and played in vaudeville. Mickey Cochran went in vaudeville. He used to play the sax. I went in vaudeville. I played Low State in New York and Jersey City, and I went in also. That seemed to be the thing to do in those days.
A lot of players did that.
And but now, it's the same thing today. They don't go in vaudeville because there isn't that much vaudeville, but they go into TV shows.
So, how about your first meeting with the Babe? St. Peter?
Well, Babe was wonderful. He was, he was just one of the, he called everybody kid and everything, and he was just like, I don't know, just a great guy. But naturally, I had never seen a major league ball game until I was in one, because they didn't go any further west than St. Louis or Chicago, and just to be back there with the Yankees and Tony Lazzari, who I read about so much, and he was a local boy from around home, and all those kind of things. And here you are in the Yankee Stadium. They got a crowd of 70,000 people, and there wasn't that many people in the county I came from. Only about 400 in my hometown. And it's a feeling that I just can't describe it. I'm not that smart.
Bob Shockey is manager, right?
Yes, sir. Miller Huggins died in 30 when they bought me.
And Shockey lasted only 1 year.
That's right. And then Joe McCarthy came.
Was there a problem that he had with that caused the team? It didn't do that badly, did it, in 30? I think finished second.
No, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say it was a problem. When you're a rookie, you don't. Even when you become a veteran, you don't know what's going on. But I mean, I don't know. No, because McCarthy was through with the Cubs. If you recall, they got beat in 30. And so he joined us in 31. And he was fired by the Cubs, I believe, and he came over to the American League in 31.
We talked to Bob Shockey. Somebody grew up in Syracuse then. And he felt somewhat put out the way he was handled over there that one year. I don't know. Now offhand.
Well, I wouldn't know about that.
He felt that he was kind of an interim manager or something.
Well, I wouldn't know anything about that, but I know I was there for. Well, actually, I wasn't there the whole year because I think I went down to St. Paul around June or something.
What about your weight? You hear so much about your weight and that you weren't that strong and so on when you came up there.
I weighed 152 pounds when I joined the Yankees. 6 foot, just about 6'1.5" at the time.
And this milk farm business?
Well, I went down. There was a place down in Saratoga, California, and I had to go down there and stay 6 weeks before spring training, and I'd go in and I had to go to bed at 9 o'clock, get up at 7. I drank 2 to 3 quarts of milk a day. I haven't had a glass of milk since, but I mean, one of those kind of things, and go rest in the afternoon. No, and I'd lay down in the afternoon and things like that. But the funny part of it was, then I'd go to spring training and in Florida, and I'd run it all off in about 4 or 5 days. You know, I'd be back to my natural weight. And they kept telling me, I think my first year as a regular, I won 21, and I won 24, and they told me I wasn't big enough. And then first weight I put on, I got up and I put it around my chest, more or less. And then that started to tie me up. It wasn't as loose. And then they said, go and take it off. So, and then, in fact, I'm only about now 7 or 8 pounds heavier than strip, that is. Last year I pitched, I got up to 168 pounds. And I'm not much.
It was never a problem with your pitching. You always never got tired, did you?
Oh, no.
Never.
The year I won 26 and lost 5, I pitched 24 or 25 complete games. And I 280 innings or something.
That led the league, too.
Yeah, 280 innings, and I think I led in base on balls that year, too.
Well, no, he led in strikeouts.
Well, there you are. I think if you've got it there, 2 or 3 times I pitched way over 200 innings, and I never weighed that much.
So it really was not a concern, although they
No,
thought
does it say how many complete games I
No,
pitched?
it doesn't have that here, I'm sorry to say.
Does it say in any of those columns?
No. It just says the games played in.
Any up here, or is that somebody else? He's probably got a whole lot of them.
Who's that up there?
I don't know.
Somebody else. 1900 players.
No.
So, McCarthy, though,
Was it?
you had a great admiration for McCarthy.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there was anybody on the club that didn't really love the guy. I mean, he was a great manager, and they say, well, he had the troops, but show me a guy that can win without the troops. There's a lot of people that have had great ball clubs that couldn't manage and didn't win. I think Joe McCarthy would have been a big success than anything that he'd have taken up in his life, because he was a great leader of men, and everybody admired him. And
we read that some of the earlier managers had to let Ruth pretty much go his own way. They couldn't deal with him as they did with the others.
Well, I don't know before I got there, because see, I wasn't there. When I got there in 30, as we were talking about, Bob Shockey was manager. Then I got there back in 31. No, I never remember Babe being so. The only thing I remember about it is I happened to read about what happened before I was there. And that's only, as far as I'm concerned, hearsay.
I guess Miller Huggins and the Babe, and he had a few tiffs here and there.
Well, I've heard that. That is, I read it.
How about, did you have any contract disputes with Colonel Rupert?
I had one, and when I was trying to get a 2-year contract, and he was, of course we had Ed Barrow. You had to deal with Ed Barrow all the time, and Ed Barrow was rough. And of course I held out 1 year. Actually, I don't think I was a holdout. I had asked the Yankees for a certain amount of money, and they refused to pay me, so truthfully, they were holding out. It wasn't me. I was ready to sign. Yeah.
So, did you ever get Wade Hoyt tells about sometimes he got someone at the brewery?
Oh, yeah, well, that's what time, and that's supposed to be a true story, too. And after he had gone through how much his brewery was worth and his buildings and the Yankees, this was worth $5 million, that's worth $20 million, this is worth... He said, what do you think I am, a millionaire? Rupert said to Wade or something like that. Yeah, they had some great stories.
Okay, now, some of these stories that we read about Tony Lazzeri.
What happened in Detroit? When I threw him the ball?
Yeah.
Well, that's a true story, because they used to talk about Tony being smart. We were playing the Tigers, and I had him beat, and I believe that's the year Mel Harder and I tied in shutouts with 6 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
and I've got him beat, quite a few runs, and they always talked about Lazzeri, how smart he was. And I got a man on first, and Greenberg's hitting. And he hit the ball right back to me, and I started to throw the ball to Frankie Corsetti, who was coming over to take the throw. And Tony is standing way off on the other side. And so I threw the ball to him, and we didn't get anybody, naturally. And he come over and said, what'd you throw the ball to me for? And I said, Tony, all I heard was how smart you were. I said, I didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to see what you could do with it. And I tell you, it's a good thing we won the game, or I'd have been on the moon ahead of the astronauts with that McCarthy out there.
Then when you got back in dugout, you told McCarthy another story?
I told him, that's what I told Joe when he wanted to know about what I was thinking about. And I said, well, Lazzeri's so smart. I said, I didn't know what to do with it. I want to see what he could do with it. And
that was quick thinking, though. You were going to throw to Corsetti, and this thought occurred to you right at the moment.
Well, I was thinking possibly if anything happens, I'll be on my way back to Newark or Kansas City.
There's one of those stories tells about Lazzeri came in to talk to you once, where I think it's the World Series of the Giants, and it's your head, but they load the bases, and Ott's up, and...
Yeah, he wanted to know how he's going to pitch Ott, and Ott used to pick his right foot up real high. And I said, Tony, if I can time it when Ottie picks up his foot, I'll pitch under it.
This is when he said, you got yourself into a jam.
Oh, yeah, that time, too, yeah. I said, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, well, you got in it. Why don't you see if you can get out of it?
You really said that. Yeah. There was a little bit of psychology there.
Oh, yeah, well, because Tony... he was one of the greats, and he could relax you. You know, he could get you relaxed. And I remember one time when Gehrig and McCarthy told Corsetti, he said, when you take infield practice, he said, run with the ball and try and knock that glove right off of Gehrig, you know, and because I want to get him a lot of pep. Frankie's taking infield practice and howling and throwing the ball, and Gehrig's getting angry. Well, it wasn't Gehrig at all. It was Corsetti that he told to do it. He was like a psychologist. He had Corsetti, he didn't tell Corsetti he was playing dead, so he went out, was fired at Gehrig, and Gehrig's wondering what's going wrong with Corsetti, but he was such a good leader of men, and he was, I think, of course, I know he was the best, as far as I'm concerned, a handler of pitching and spotting pitchers. I don't know how some of the others were, but on other clubs, but I've heard so many people mention that he could pick spots for pitchers and for the guys that won 12, 14, 15, you know, and he was just great at that. Mm-hmm. And everybody admired him because he stood behind you and everything else. That is all the team. And he was just great. Great.
How about Well, DiMaggio came up in 36.
Yeah, we started rooming together.
Was that right?
Yeah, and he was a great roomie, great ball player.
Didn't say much, did he? Or?
Never talked. And he was the type of guy that we'd go on a road trip by train, go to St. Louis, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and back, and he might not even say 4 words all the time. And then the next time you go out with him, on a road trip, he would tuck your arm and leg off. He was just one of those kind of guys, very quiet, shy. And I think that a lot of people thought that Joe was conceited because he didn't talk, but that wasn't so at all. He wasn't conceited, he was just quiet. Yeah, he was a great guy.
And there was a story about the night that his hitting streak was stopped in Cleveland, that the taxi cab driver put the hex on him almost.
He said, if you don't get a hit the first time up tonight, Joe, you're through. And that's the way it happened, too. And I got out of the cab and walked. Another time we were going to the ballpark, I happened to, because we used to walk back and forth a lot when we were staying at the Cleveland Hotel Cleveland. And I'm getting a shoe shine before I left. There was a shoe shine parlor along there, and I'm getting a shoe shine. Joe's waiting for me. And the guy said, mentioned something about the Yankees had a bad team, and whoever, and I was going to pitch that night. He said, whoever pitched tonight's going to get beat. And you can never see Joe ask him. I got off the staff, paid the guy, and walked on. One shoe shine, they had the shoe polish on the other. God almighty. How superstitious can you get?
Did you didn't like Lake Park to pitch in, I guess, huh? Right?
Well, I don't think anybody really liked that Lake Park as much. I have to take that back. The hitters liked it, let's put it that way. I don't think the pitchers liked it as much. And
did you have a favorite park to pitch in?
I loved to pitch in Chicago, Comiskey Park, although I never had that much success there. You see, the lines were 350 down the lines. Yeah. And that's before they put a little fence inside there.
And they got off some.
And the wind always blew in. And, but it always seemed like I never had that good of luck in Comiskey Park. And, I don't know, I tried everything. But, I won a few games there, and I lost some there, too.
Tell me about Lou Gehrig's decline there, if you can. Those last... It hit kind of suddenly, I guess, didn't it, there?
Well, it was in spring training. He had made a movie, I don't know if you recall, Rawhide was the name of it or something. Everybody I can remember, sports writers saying, Gehrig's eyes, Klieg lights, they said he got. You know, the bright lights bothered his eyes, and nobody knew what was wrong with him. And we went to, all spring, balls would hit, but they didn't carry, and once in a while he'd stumble a little bit, and of course we didn't know it. And then we had an off day. Gehrig, we went to Kansas City to play, I believe it was, our farm team in association, and Gehrig went to Rochester, Minnesota. And he rejoined us in Detroit. And that's when he announced his retirement. He said he was hurting the ball club, and he wanted to, McCarthy didn't say a word to him as far as benching him or anything, and Joe said he's going to bench himself, and which he did. And I admire Joe McCarthy for that. And I've heard stories since then, I don't know how true they are, be quoted that they had given Lou, I believe, 2 years to live or something like that with the disease, and we were playing in Detroit when he passed away. And Babe Dahlgren took his place, and I think Babe hit a couple of home runs that day, and I believe we beat Detroit by a big score then. I just don't remember rightly. But Lou was a wonderful man. He was a hard man to know, too. He was very quiet. And I've heard and read and been asked questions about Gehrig and Babe not getting along together. That's not so. like other ball clubs or other businesses or whatever you have your own crew that you run around with, you know what I mean? And Gary and Dickie and Jesse Hill, who later became athletic director of University of Southern California, and Red Rolf, they played a lot of bridge. And it was one of those running games that would start in spring training and then settle up at the end of the year, you know. And they were all excellent bridge players. And Gary was also a type of guy that read the bestsellers, and he loved to go to the opera and the symphony, listen to the music. But then they said, well, he and Babe didn't get along. That's not so. I never heard them argue, and we went to Japan, and we went around the world together, and by boat that was, because no planes were flying, and I'm a bad sailor. I get seasick in a bad bathtub, but God almighty, I never heard those men argue.
It seems to me like the reporters so often try to stir things up, and they may take a little incident and make a great big issue.
Well, that could happen. That could have been where something like they might have been in the clubhouse when one guy said something, oh, so-and-so or something like that. You never know. I mean, because once in a while, but I never heard them argue. Mm-hmm. And I was, let me see, Babe, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. So that was 5 years while I was there that Babe was with them. And of course I was there longer, but I mean then Babe left us at the end of 34 when we went to Japan to play exhibition game. And but I never heard him argue.
What's the story about Gehrig and Chapman getting somebody to run down?
Well, I think that was in Fenway Park. They had a guy in a run to, I believe it was Luke Sewell. I believe he was catching for the Red Sox at that particular. They had him in a run down there, and the man scored from third before they tagged him out. He was supposed to be the third out, but he wasn't tagged out yet, and the guy left third and scored and crossed the plate, and the game's over, and they were still chasing the guy back and forth. Oh, gee.
Well, did you start telling stories very early, or is this quality you have?
I don't know.
Where did this come from? I have a quotation here from Taylor Spink that you are the outstanding wit of diamond history. And he mentions Jeremy Schaefer and some other outstanding wits. But you...
Did he put half in front of that?
But this was...
I don't know when I started telling stories. I guess all my life. I used to oral compositions at grammar school. I don't know. It's just one of those things.
And I've heard people who have heard you speak tell a couple other stories I didn't read about it. One was about the umpire just behind the plate just filled up his sacks with baseballs. And runner on first, and the pitcher threw a wild pitch underneath. Everybody in the umpire jumped up, and these baseballs went flying all over the place. And the catcher tried to throw out the runner at second, third. So you did tell that one, didn't you?
Yeah, but you know, are
these really true?
Yeah, it's stories that you've told, but you know, it's a lot of times. I've spoken in every state in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. But you sort of, I met a guy today or tomorrow, whenever it might be, a person, and they'll say, what's that story that you told in so-and-so in 1965? Well, I've forgotten, you know, a lot of them. And it's a lot of times when people will just tell me one or two things about it, I remember it, but, you know, I very seldom ever have something that I read, maybe one word I'll put down on a piece of paper which will remind me of a story. Mm-hmm. And they just come in...
Do you speak without notes in your...
Yeah.
Is that right?
There's a rule. Mm-hmm. But the toughest thing for me to do is you're speaking and it's not tough, but I mean, you're trying to figure now, did I ever speak here before? And you're trying to switch some stories around. And just like I had about 3 or 4 of the coaches come up to me today and said, I heard you speak at Phoenix in the NAIA meetings and that they had down there. And then another one said, "Oh yeah," he said, "I heard you talk over in St. Joe, Missouri, and I've been to the." And now they're here tonight. I'm trying to think. I hope they've forgotten the stories because I know I'm going to repeat some of them. I didn't. I never had a gag writer or anything like that. And I more or less try to tell stories that actually happened, which are, I think, are the best kind of stories. And especially with young ball players that are out here now, like they are now, and they think, "Oh my God, that happened in the big league." Well, then I haven't done so badly. You know how some of the dumb things happen, and I don't tell dirty stories.
Have you thought about writing a book? Or have you been urged to?
Yes, by quite a few people, and we had one sold to Doubleday, and a lot of things went wrong with the man that he came very highly recommended by guys like Red Smith and different writers, and
was the manuscript completed?
Yes, everything was completed, but we got it down. Well, it's just one of those things I don't want to talk about.
Okay. Now, about the All-Star game in '33, you did start, did you?
I started 5 of the first 6.
Is that right?
Yes. And I drove in the first run that was ever driven in the history of All-Star baseball.
Is that?
I got a base hit off of Wild Bill Hallahan and drove in the first. I had the first RBI, and then I started. I was in that game that Carl Hubble struck out Ruth, Gehrig, Fox, Simmons, and Cronin in a row, and Dickey got a hit, and then he struck me out. And they never mentioned striking me out. One of those things. And then I was in the game. I started the game here in Cleveland.
35.
Yeah, and I went 5. I pitched the first 6 innings, and that's when they changed the rule.
I see.
And Mel Harder really started the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then from then on, a starting pitcher could only go 3. But the most amazing thing about that ruling, a starting pitcher can go 3, and you're all starters in those kind of games as a rule, right? And even though you're relieved. But let's say a starting pitcher starts and he goes his 3 innings. And now it comes in the 6th inning, so you've had 2 pitchers. Now, 7th, 8th, and 9th, and the score is tied, that guy can go 10, 11, 12, 13, and still he's a starting pitcher.
Yeah.
It's a funny rule.
Yeah. Well, it gives people a chance to see them all.
Well, that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
And I personally believe they talk about stuff in the ballot box. I personally believe that they ought to let the people vote for the players they want, whether they stuff the box or not. Because the people around the league get to see a lot of those people, and that's who they want to see play, and they vote for them, and rightfully so. I mean, I don't care if they stuff the ballot box or not. I believe that all started at Cincinnati, wasn't it?
Wade Hoyt was responsible for that.
And I think as long as and you know, it's a funny thing about, here's another way to look at it too. You know, you have a lot of fans on the other towns, even though you're playing against their team. And a lot of fans are going to vote for different players they want to see, because when it's in a National League town, they never get to see the American League, unless there's 2 teams on it. Like Chicago had the White Sox and the Cubs. And St. Louis used to be that way with the Browns and the Cardinals, and the New York with the 3 Cubs. I think they should vote. That's the way it started.
Yeah, that year in Cincinnati, Wade Hoyt was telling all the people to vote for Cincinnati players, and they wound up with 8 starters from the Reds.
Well, we had it. I remember we had about 7 from the Yankees, and we never. They never said it was. I remember Dickey catching. Well, this is going to be tough. And Crissetti played. Red Rolfe played. Joe DiMaggio played. Charlie Keller was in the lineup. And I was in the lineup. That's about six Yankees, and I think it's fair. The people, they want to go and see who they want to see play.
Was Joey Sewell still with the Yankees when you came up there?
Yes, sir. Joe Sewell came to the Yankees after I went. Joe Sewell joined us in 1932. When I first saw Joe Sewell, he was with Cleveland. Like Walter Johnson was the manager. And
there's bat control for you. Joe Sewell.
He claimed, and I believe it's true, he held his bat way up like that, and he claimed that he saw the ball hit the bat. In fact, I used to kid him about his hitting compared to me. I think he struck out 3 times or 4 times and 600 times at bat. And that was against legitimate spitball pitchers and everything else. And I said, Joe, I got to be a better hitter than you. And he said, well, I said, I struck out 5 times in one game. I said, hell, it took you 600 times at bat to strike out.
Did you ever strike him out?
No, I don't recall. I don't remember.
You probably didn't pitch against him.
He said one day, I'll tell you, there was a left-handed pitcher with the Chicago White, Pat Caraway. A funny, herky-jerky guy. And the first 2 times Sewell faced him, Caraway struck him out. And Sewell said he never remembered going back to his high school days where he ever struck out twice in one game. That's something, boy. Whew. But he was a great ball player. He come up as a kid right out of the University of Alabama in 19... Ray Chapman got hit in the head.
He needed a shortstop in a hurry.
And his brother Luke caught for the...
He had a tremendous amount of talent at the University of Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
Rig Stevenson came out of the crowd.
He was with the Cubs.
Yeah. Jackie Hayes came out with the Cubs.
That poor guy went blind.
Yeah. We interviewed him down in Alabama there, and had us seeing that dog right with him.
Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Gee, I haven't seen Jack.
He was, his spirit was just indomitable. Just a great guy. And he was a great inspiration to a lot of, I think there's a black school for blind children. Like your hits as a pitcher?
Well, I don't think any pitcher, there was ever a pitcher that lived that didn't like his hits.
You got 4 hits in the game with Washington.
4 for 5.
And you wanted to have your picture taken with Joe DiMaggio, showing him how to hit.
Because we were roommates, and I think the funniest thing about that was I led the league in hitting till I pitched the next time out. But I have an ashtray. But I had a lot of fun with my hitting. I wasn't that good a hitter. In fact, I was dangerous until I swung.
How about batting against Lefty Grove?
I hit against Grove. I swung against Grove. Wahlberg, and that same Pat Caraway, and Detroit had a pitcher by the name of Elon Hogshead, an Indian boy. Oh, those kind of guys. Of course, they all bothered me, but I mean, those guys. I remember one day I was hitting against Rube Wahlberg, and Wahlberg was with the Philadelphia Athletics, and he had a tremendous curveball too. 2 strikes, and the next pitch is behind me, like. And he's coming over, and the last, Bill Dineen was umpiring behind the plate. He was a great pitcher with the Boston Braves. And the last minute, last second, I fell down, and the ball came right down, caught. And Bill Dineen was laughing. He said, "Strike 3, you're out, Gomez." And I said, "Yes," and I'm damn glad of it. See? And the dugout was so close to the home plate there in Old Shibe Park in Philadelphia. McCarthy heard me. And, he gave me a pretty good going over it. Then another time I was on third base. How I got there, I don't know. But Art Fletcher was our coach, and we were playing the Washington Senators. Let me show you the type of hitter I was. I'm running up and down the base path, and I can actually steal home because Bobby Burke, the left-hander, wasn't paying attention to me. And we got a big lead. And I went back to our coach, and I said, "Fletch, I can steal home." He said, "What'd you say?" I said, "I can steal home." He said, "Look, it took you 13 years to get over here. What do you want to do, louse it up?" And so that was the end of my steal. That would have been a big thrill for me.
How about pitches thrown at batters? Is there much of that really go on?
The ball used to slip a lot. And I don't think we ever actually threw at a hitter unless somebody threw at one of your hitters, or went in high with his spikes and things like that. Well, then you protect your men too. But I believe in pitching inside and brushing them back from the plate. Yes, I think you should to set up your own. You want to keep him loose up there and get him away so you can set up another pitch or something. I believe in that. But I don't believe in deliberately hitting the man in the head or something like that.
Did you hit many hitters?
I hit a few.
Did you know Roy Parmalee?
Oh, do I ever know Roy? Tarzan Parmalee. I think one year he broke 4 or 5 wrists.
He was wild.
But he was wild. He didn't actually throw it.
We talked to him too. He said he was useless after he hit a batter. You had to take him out of the game. He couldn't throw again. He was just so
His fastball was like most guys' sliders today. It would duck off. I think he broke Dick Bartell's wrist one time, and
he hit 5 people in the head.
Oh, he hit them all over.
Major and minor.
But he's not thrown at him.
No. One guy was out in the American Association. He had a guy, and he was out for about 4 or 5 days, but he came back.
See, none of those were, maybe our heads were harder. Well, those days we didn't have a helmet. Plus, the first things they put was a little insert inside the cloth hat, and that was it.
I'm surprised so few people didn't become badly injured. And Ray Chapman was the only real casualty there ever was.
I remember when Mickey Cochran got hit in New York City, and poor Bump Hadley, God have mercy on both their souls. Mickey lost the ball in the crowd, and he admitted it later. I know a lot of nasty letters were written by fans, and in a way rightfully so, because, you know, they read something or hear something, and they thought that Bump Hadley was thrown. But truthfully, knowing Bump as well and a former teammate, he didn't throw at Mickey. But Mickey lost the ball. And a lot of times a guy will lose the ball. I don't think Gossage was thrown at the little Ron Say in the World Series. I just think the ball, from watching at an angle, you would see the ball take off. And a lot of times that happens. And I don't know.
Now, you were there for one of these most remembered games in the World Series of '32. When
I would say, Babe, I know the question. Did Babe call a home run shot? I would say yes. Is that what you were going to ask me?
Well, weren't the Yankees irked at the Cubs, though, for their treatment of Mark Koenig?
Yeah, that's what it all started over, more or less. And
cut him in about a half share.
Yeah, he was the spark plug. They won 20 in a row or something like that. And there was a lot of bench jockeying going on between both clubs.
Well, I talked to Woody English. He lives up here in Newark, Ohio now, in retirement, and I think he was playing third that day when that event occurred. He gave me the impression he thought it was a kind of I got 2 strikes, 1 to go.
And he had his bat pointed out like that. Babe did. I remember very vividly. I remember Babe. I think we scored in the first inning, or they scored in the first inning, or however it was. Then they went ahead of us, I believe, and Babe came in and he said, "This game's only even." Johnny Allen, I believe, started the game that day. I think Lou Gehrig hit 625 in it, and Dickey hit around 500 for the whole series. And we had a wonderful team there. Then it got to be a lot of pitches slipping out of pitchers' hands, and guys were hitting the dirt, and Joe Sewell was down, and he got him hit the right field wall. Chappie was down, he got him hit the left field wall, and things like that. Which, by the way, Mark lives not far from me in California. Mark Koenig now.
Yeah, I think there was a story in the Sporting News last year.
Yeah,
so
he,
he's kind of bitter about things, I guess.
Well, he's been going to a few games lately. He lost his wife, and you know, and Mark is up there. He's around 80 years old now, or maybe 80. I don't know. And he just, you know, you don't know whether. I don't know anything about it. I know he's always very friendly with me when I see him. He only lives about 25 minutes. He's over in a little town called Sonoma, Boy Springs, in that section.
Yeah, we visited Sonoma a couple of years ago. We were out west, and I didn't know he was nearby. We were trying to...
Did you go all the way up through the wine country? Isn't that wonderful? Were you there at the time when they were making the wine, or had the grapes already been picked, or what?
We just got a tour of the Swiss colony place.
Well, you didn't go all the way through Calistoga and all the way up through the... There must be 100 wineries in there. A lot of them you never heard of.
Yeah, I know we were amazed by that. How about umpire relations in your case?
I had good relations with umpires. Although if you went to dinner with one tonight, that doesn't mean you were going to get a break tomorrow, because I don't believe that. In fact, I know as far as I'm concerned that don't go on. But I mean, they umpire the way they see the ball, and you pitch the way you pitch the ball. I don't think, truthfully, an umpire beats you. Although at times I thought they did, but I mean, deep down their heart, I don't think they do. They're calling the way they see him, and
I've heard of players say they may differ, one umpire from another, but as long as each is consistent.
Yeah, that's
true. He may give you a little bit here, but if he does it consistently, then they cannot complain of it.
Bill McGowan, I'll never forget, was umpire once over in League Park. Earl Averill was a hitter. And I swear the ball was 5-6 inches, I know, outside. And he called a strike. And Averill was jumping up and down and hollering and everything else. And McGowan didn't run him, but I could hear him. And I'm standing on the mound. I'm not going to get in it anyhow. And so finally, you know the ball was outside, Earl. And McGowan said, well, so on that. And he said, another thing, Earl, how do you know Gomez is not a friend of mine? Just like that. And I had to laugh. And Abel couldn't say another word, you know. He just stopped them. But, I mean, those things don't happen to you.
Did you ever get thrown out of a game?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
While you're pitching, then?
I got thrown out one the time I lit the match against Bob Feller. But I think...
You lit the match?
Yeah, when I was up there hitting. But I think one of the funniest things that ever happened to me with him, Cal Hubbard, who was one of the great pro football player, great college player and everything else, when he went to umpire, and he was big. Yeah, Cal was about 6'5", weighed 260. Of course, today you see more big men than when you did then. And we're playing in Boston. I was pitching, and I charged home plate. And he let me get all the way into home plate. And just as I got my mouth open to say something, he said, I missed the ball. You had it by 6 inches. And I couldn't say a word. I turned right around and went right back to the mound. He agreed that he missed it, and it was just one of those things that shocked me so much. And
well, that's frankness, huh?
Those your shoes? I was wondering. I thought it was my arm I was feeling smelling for a while.
So, Tommy Conley, was he gone when you came
Oh, no, he was still in the league.
Well, he was with the league when it first started in 1901.
He was there for a long time.
He was little. He was
a little Irishman, a Boston accent.
I guess he used just his dignity and his manner would tone down people like the Bagel once he aroused.
He had that Irish brogue he could cut with a knife.
So, looking at your record here, in 1939, you were, or was it 40? Okay. Well, 39, you're 12-8.
Yeah.
And in 40, you were 3-3.
3-3. I had a bad arm. That's when I hurt my back. And
what happened there?
I had hurt my back, and then I come back, I think, 15-5.
Yeah?
And I hurt my back. And
playing or?
Yeah, covering first base, and I got knocked down. Heine Manouche ran into me in Washington. And then I started trying to throw the same as Dizzy Dean did too. Before I was better, and I started favoring my back, and I hurt my arm, and I was just practically through. And the game that I went down with Washington. No, first they sold me to the Boston Braves, and I didn't pitch for the Braves outside of some exhibition games. And Casey Stengel was a manager.
Well, they said that was going to be a great combination.
Stengel, yeah. Now, we trained that year in Choate School of Wallingford, Connecticut. That's
a Warrior?
Choate School. The Kennedys and a lot of those, the Mellons and all them went there. And then I got my release from Boston, and Mr. Griffith, Clark Griffith, called me up. I went down, I pitched one game against the Chicago White Sox, and I got beaten the game, and I think I allowed 3-4 hits, 1 run. And that 1 run put me, by the way, into a higher earned run bracket, 9, wasn't it? What's the earned run average? None?
That year is, for that year at Washington,
yeah.
Total. That was 5.40 that year for Washington.
Earned runs.
Yeah.
And I think they only got 1, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then in the World Series against Cincinnati, I pitched 1 inning, and they got 1 run, so I wound up with a 9-run earned run average. Is that right?
Well, I don't have the World Series here. I got on the next page, which I didn't do. So.
Yeah.
But so were you out that year then at 1940? Were you 3-3? You just
They didn't pitch. Does give innings pitch? I think I pitched 27. Was that it?
Yeah. So this very early in the season this happened then.
Yeah. Well, it happened. It happened the year before. What did I have the year? 16?
No, 12-8.
12-8. And it happened in there. And then how many innings did I pitch that year? Not too many.
198.
That many?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Must have been the end of the year.
But, I know that's the year it happened. And then I came back the next year and couldn't pitch at all. And...
Where did you... well, you won 15 in the next year, so...
Well, then but I didn't pitch only 27 innings, and I took treatments all the time and everything. And the next year, I come back, and with Murphy's right arm, I won 15.
How was your speed then?
Fair. What did I strike out, 30? 36?
76.
That many?
But walked 103.
Yeah, well, so couldn't throw. See, I didn't have too bad a control all the way through.
Yeah, your strikeout walk ratio was always very good. But Murphy, you had some stories about him, didn't you? How he'd come in and...
15-5. That was the year that, my last year that it seemed like I would start and he would finish. I tried to take him out. I depended on him so much, I tried to take him out as a dependent of my income tax. And that all started by saying remarks that... we were in the Yankee Stadium, and Murphy had relieved 4 or 5 times days in a row, which they do today. But in those days, a relief pitcher would relieve in the first inning and go the rest of the game, and everything. And he had relieved 4 or 5 days, and the newspaper men are on the bench, and McCarthy came by. I came by, and they were all sitting on the bench, and McCarthy said, "Can you pitch today?" And I said, "I better talk to Murphy." He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, he's relieved 5 days in a row. He might be tired." And that's how all that started. And then I always kidded about it.
Well, Roger Peckinpah said that he was first impressed by relief pitching in Washington with Fred Marbury.
Well, he was the first great one, and then Wilcie Moore was the next one with the Yankees.
So that was, but it was slow catching on. I mean, there weren't that many in the 20s. You were supposed to finish the game, weren't you, when you went out there?
You're doing right. I know the year I won 26, I pitched either 24, complete game, all there where there's a lot of innings pitched. Those were due to complete games.
Did McCarthy ever leave anybody in after they were pretty well beaten and just let them stay in there? Or
Not very often. Unless you wanted to stay in. And then he never believed in that you were ever beat either. Even though you'd be behind 8, 9, 10 runs, he didn't believe we were beat. That's why we had some great ball clubs.
In 42, you were 6-4.
Yeah, that was...
What happened to Murphy?
Well, I didn't pitch. What was it? How many?
80 innings.
80 innings.
6-4. 4.28. So... And were you unhappy about being sold in Boston?
Well, naturally, I was unhappy, but I mean, I still wanted to stay in baseball, but I couldn't throw. And the last game I pitched was in Detroit. Chicago, I'm wrong, Chicago. And I was with Washington. And we went in there to play. We played a doubleheader that day. One was an exhibition game, and we played Great Lakes Naval Training Station with Mize and all that bunch. And I started for Washington, and I shut them out. And I struck out 8 or 9, whatever it was. And my arm was great. My fastball was pretty good. It was alive and everything. And I thought, oh, it came back. And then we went from Chicago. Ossie Blugie was manager of Washington. We went from Chicago to Detroit, and they sent me to the bullpen. Benny Bengal was the coach then. He was formerly with the Yankees. And they sent me to the bullpen, and it got to one of those places where to warm up. And I used to like to start warming up not too far from the catcher and go back, to the regular distance. And Benny kept on saying, you better get hot. Ossie wants you to go in. I said, Benny, I can't throw. He said, you're kidding. I said, no, I can't throw. And it was funny, just 2 days before I'd shut out Great Lakes, and I struck out 8 or 9 men. And then after that, I always thought that possibly they did it to make me feel good, missing the ball. No, and Dutch Leonard, who later pitched, he was with Washington, and then I think he wound up with the Cubs. I don't know who he wound up with, but he and I went out to dinner that night, and I kept saying, boy, Dutch, you don't know how great I feel. My arm, I don't even have a pain. But I couldn't throw anymore. That was it. Went back, and I had offers to go to the minor leagues, but I didn't want to go to the minor leagues not that I thought I was too big to go to the minors, but I knew darn well that I couldn't throw that well, and they'd probably only use me in each town to draw a little bit, and then I didn't want to get hammered. So there was a very famous bunch of guys. Well, they weren't. I don't mean famous, but there was a team over in Long Island, New York, that was named the Bushwicks. And Tony Cuccinello and a lot of former Major League ball players played over there, and we played 1 game a week. And I pitched over there. I think I pitched 6 or 7 games. And then I went to, that was it. But Jim Barton, a great actor that played in Tobacco Road and a lot of movies, and he had a team called the Barton's Nighthawks down in, so I don't know if you ever saw the play Tobacco Road, where he was down there in the dirt on the stage and old bib overalls. When he owned the ballpark out in Long Island, he had this team, and they're former all-professional ball players. And I went down there one day because he called me up, and he wanted to know if I wanted to come down and pitch for him. He said, come on down tomorrow. At that particular time, I had been out of baseball, and I went to work for the Norden Bomb Site. And I was
about that one, this story.
And I was recreational director for Norden Bomb Site. And so I went out there, and I saw this guy on the fence working, patching up holes, and I said, is Mr. Barton around? Because I'd seen him on the stage, but he looked so dirty on the stage with the makeup, so I went back, and he said, I'll meet you in the bar. Well, he had the bar with the ballpark, too, so he made a lot of money that way, too, people go. So I went in, I had a glass of beer, and he come in, and he said, you're Gomez, and I said, yeah. He said, you want to come down? I'm James Barton. I just thought I was some handyman working on the fence, and he was in the big dough then, And then I said, no, I can't throw, and I don't want to. And so I stayed with Norden Bomb Site, and then we were the first athletes to go overseas to entertain the troops. We went to North Africa and Italy, and I was with Jack Sharkey, a former heavyweight fighter, Freddie Cochran, who was tournament manager of all the pro golfers at that time, and myself. And we went over for 6 weeks, no salary, to go and everything else. And we traveled for the USO, and we went over for 6 weeks, and the government kept us over there for 6 months. We were there at Anzio and all through there, and I traveled with George Rapp. He joined us, and then he'd leave, and another guy was Humphrey Bogart. What a wonderful man, a little short man, but he was a hell of a nice guy. And one of the nicest people, with all due respect to everybody, as far as I'm concerned, in giving up time, was Joey Brown. Boy, he went right up there and everything. And I'm telling you, boy, I was scared all the time. And we passed out Purple Hearts, and we go into the hospitals, and we weren't actors, I mean, but the guys were great. Those kids were great. Honest to God, they were great. And really shot up, some of them, but they were just wonderful.
Well, I'm sure they're great thrill for them. I read one story about when you were with Binghamton, I guess, after the war. You're managing Binghamton, did you?
Yes, sir.
How'd you like managing?
I liked it better when I was pitcher coach of the Yankees minor league farm system. I managed in Venezuela, and I managed in Havana, and I managed Binghamton. And
too many headaches, huh?
Well, I wasn't put out to be a manager.
Well, they told me you were playing in Scranton and you were batting, and
no, that was in Binghamton when I caught the pitch.
Yeah.
Tommy Fine, who won 27 games that year, he wound up and threw a big high pitch, and it's a regular league game too, and I reached out, caught him, threw it up, and fumbled the ball. And the guy that's president of the Florida State League, McDonald, his father was behind home plate. He was the umpire in chief. He said, "What the hell are you doing?"
What did he call it?
Cost me $50.
Oh, that right?
Sure.
You'd always wanted to do that, hadn't you?
Sure.
It was a lifelong dream come true.
Yeah, you don't know why those things happen, but of course, being left-handed, you know, we always have somebody talking to us that nobody else sees. You know?
Well, I read somewhere were you in school? You were they tried to make you right-handed. Is that it? Yeah.
Well, then in those days they wouldn't let you write left-handed. They'd knock you on the knuckles.
Yeah.
But imagine doing that today in school.
Yeah. At a lawsuit.
Oh, would you ever?
Yeah. So you were with Binghamton for a couple of years there.
Yeah, that's all. Then I went back to running clinics for the Yankees and working with some of the young pitcher coach and scouting, and then I went to work for Wilson.
How did you happen to go to work for Wilson? How'd that develop?
I knew a friend. I was up in Butler, Pennsylvania was one of our farm teams, and I still haven't thought of that outfielder's name that went to Ohio State, and Dave Pirelli, and we went up to scout them in Rochester, Pennsylvania. And Turk Riley was in town, and he was with Wilson for many years, and so I said to Turk, Turk, how do you get a job like you got? I'd like to do that kind of work. And he said, where are you going? I said, I got to go up and look at these two kids up there. And so he says, call my room when you come back. I called. He said, you want to go to work for Wilson? And I said, sure. And I went. That was the year that you played the Braves here in Cleveland. And the first thing they sent me out was one of those big trunks, about 6 foot long, looked like a casket. And they had all that stuff, samples, and they sent it to my home, and I was living in Long Island, and I thought, oh God, somebody sent me a body or something. I thought it was a gag, but that's when I went to work for them.
Has your work been largely speeches?
No, yes, talks and sales and promotion, public relations, spring training, covered all the leagues. That was rough then because there was only Turk and I in that department. We covered every minor league club, and I think there was 52 leagues in there.
I think so. That was a peak of it. Peak of minor league baseball.
In fact, was it the old Middle Atlantic League was the league through here there.
Oh, yeah.
Middle Atlantic. Bailey.
Elmer Daly.
Elmer Daly was the president of the league.
From,
Geez, I'm going to have a headache when I get out of here thinking back that far.
hope not.
No, but you know, I'm just trying to, names are coming back to me that I haven't even thought of for
Except
so
the
long.
outfielder for our house.
Huh?
Except the outfielder for our house.
Could I ask you how you met your wife?
Yes, sir. A friend of mine ran the Al Cooper. He was in show business, and he ran the Woodmanston Inn up in the Mamaroneck, New York. And my wife was a leading lady on Broadway then. She was in You Said It, and she was a leading lady. And Lou Holtz, the Jewish comedian, he was the leading man, and Stanley Smith was the leading man. Well, Lou Holtz, the show was built around him. He was a comedian. And June used to sing and dance in the show, and whatever goes with what they call them, an ingenue, you know, or something. So this guy that ran it, and I was rooming with Jimmy Reese, who was still in Merle Hogue, who was in the Coast League when I was there, so was Jimmy Reese and myself. And this friend of mine called me up, Al Cooper, and he said, Lefty, there's a young lady up here I'd like to have you meet. And she didn't know what you ran for when you hit the ball, you know, not much about baseball. And I went up, and I met her, and he introduced me to her, and I called her up. She took her mother and her father to the ball game, and that's the first game she saw me pitch. And she rode back with me, her mother and father drove back, and she had to go back to the theater because they'd leave. The curtain rose to say at 8 o'clock. Well, now it's 5:30 with Dave. So by the time we got, and she didn't know anything about baseball, and so finally, going down, I'm not talking much because, Jesus, when you get beat, I was never one that made it tough around home later on, but I hear so many people say winning isn't everything, but I never found out anything better than winning. And so I'm not talking. And when she got out of the car, I drove her to the theater, she said, don't feel bad, you'll beat her tomorrow. And I said, oh, Christ, this girl thinks I pitch every day, you know. Well, now we get married, and she becomes a tremendous baseball fan till this day, but one of the worst kind, a second-guesser, only second-guessing me. And I'm pitching one day in Detroit, and she's sitting there, and Charlie Gehringer is the hitter. And I'm supposed to pitch Gehringer up here, but 2 men on, and I've got a 1-run lead, but 2 strikes and no balls, and nobody in the park knows I'm going to try to throw one by him but me. And I wound up and threw a fastball, and I got it halfway by him, and he doubled into left field, 2 runs scored, and I blow the game. And we're going back, and now we're married, and we're going back, and she's sitting there in the car, and I can still hear her foot. She's going like that, and I'm not talking, she's not talking. We get all the way back to our apartment. She said, Gomez, how long do you have to pitch in the big league before you realize you cannot pitch Gehringer low, you got to pitch him high? I thought, oh, Christ, it was better when she thought I pitched every day. And she's told her that story so many times. She tells people, but it's true. But yeah, she went in. She played summer stock as leading lady out in St. Louis, open air theater.
After you're married, did she?
Oh yeah, one summer. Oh yeah, she worked. She had second lead in Of the I Sing.
Is that right?
We came to Cleveland here one week in the thing, and the show went on. Of the I Sing then went on to Chicago, and I stayed. We used to go and take an apartment, and if it had quite a long run, and she was in so many of them, I can't remember them all. But that's our careers.
That was in 1933, was it?
33, 49 years, February the 26th of this year.
50 next year. Huh?
50 next year. And this is what we're trying to figure out. I go to cover spring training. We won't be home for 26. We'll both be in Arizona. So how is the family going? Well, they come down anyhow, so I might as well have them all down there. for
Are
my
your
kids.
sons in California? Or?
I have one son left. He's in real estate, and I have 2 daughters, you know, 7 grandchildren. And my youngest son got killed when he was 20. He was a motorcycle racer. He raced all over the United States, and he lapped the field. He was in second place, and they go by to pass that man. The guy fell, and Dwayne went up the bank to keep from running over the man, and I guess they're doing around 100, and he broke his neck. And my wife was there, and a girl he was going to get married, and they were taking movies on it, and I was on my way flying east to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania to make a speech, and they called United. That's why I've always liked United, too. And United was so good. My plane was coming in from San Francisco. I had it changed at Chicago, and United held up their plane and called me in, and I ran right there outside the gate, and they said, "Your son is on the phone," my oldest boy, and so he said, "Dad, you better come home. Dwayne got hurt." So I got back on they held the plane up for about 10 minutes, and I got back on that plane and flew home.
How long ago was this?
Oh, just about 9 years. 9 years, because he got killed when he was 20, and he'd have been 29 last year. And I've been a booster of United ever since. Plus those bonus miles help. Well, I think we better get going now.
I sure want to thank you for this.
It's been my pleasure. Yeah, I've talked about guys that I haven't even thought of for.
You know, I do interview a lot of old-time ball players, and they don't know what I'm doing. You know, who am I to come to see them talk about baseball? And I'd like to get their whole life story, you know, and they begin to reminisce and think about things. A few names appear here and there, and they say this, you know, "Oh my God, I haven't thought about that for 4 years or so."
That's true.
It's really, they begin to get quite a kick out of this reminiscing.
I've often thought so many times where if you could only have, and I've got tape recorders at home, but I never use them, we're just sitting around, like in the clubhouse with a bunch of old-timers, and shooting the breeze. And just like now, there's a bunch out in California. Well, I guess they have them in every city, but out home in California, around Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, and in there, the old-timers, but they're mostly semi-pro, and a lot of professional ball players. And we sit around there nights. Once a year they have this big dinner, and we sit there, and I'm telling you, the last one was about 3 weeks ago, and I never got a man out. I mean, every time they said, "Hey, Lefty, boy, did I used to hit you," and all that, you wonder, you say, "God, I used to win once in a while," you know. And this goes back to semi-pro days, and I pitched for the Guarantee Shoes. I pitched for the Pullman car shops, you know, the railroad cars, and
I've talked to a lot of old-time players, pitchers, who never had any trouble with the babe.
No, God, no. I never had any trouble with Babe because I never pitched against him.
Let me now briefly give some background on this interview. It occurred on Thursday afternoon, June 3rd, 1982. This was the day before the NCAA Division III World Series commenced here in Marietta out at Pioneer Park. Lefty Gomez was a guest speaker at the banquet preceding this tournament on that Thursday evening, and he flew into town on the Wednesday night, was out to the ballpark in the morning, and it was arranged that I should have him for a couple hours on Thursday afternoon. So I picked him up at the hotel, brought him and his friend, another representative from the Wilson Sporting Goods Company, over to the house. We got here about 2:30 and stayed about 4:30 during this interview. He was very congenial. He had to leave about that time. He wanted to go back out to the ballpark, talk to some more of the players of the various teams. There were 6 teams competing in the tournament. Now I want to finish up this tape with some of the jokes he told Thursday night at the banquet, and which he didn't say on the tape here. Okay, he said I roomed with Joe DiMaggio for 6 years. I made him a star. They didn't know he could go back on a ball until he played with me. The secret to my success was good, clean living in a fast, friendly outfield. I had only one weakness as a hitter, a pitched ball. You know, I never broke a bat in my life until last winter, and then I ran over it in my garage. I was a holdout one year. Hank Greenberg and Jimmy Fox both sent me letters. They said, please sign. Tony Lazzari, he was a real one for getting you going. You know, we talked about his psychology earlier. He'd be out there at second chattering stuff like, geez, Gomez, I wish I was batting against you today with some of the stuff you're throwing up there. And this guy's on my team, too. Now, I've never been to Cape Kennedy to hear the rockets go off, but they never would have been any louder than those going past me that day. All of a sudden, Lazzari leaves the field and runs into the dugout. When he comes back out, I asked him what he was doing. I went in to tell McCarthy to get the merrymen off the field, Lazzari said. Jimmy Fox hit the longest home run ever hit in Yankee Stadium off me. If you've ever been there, I can get the space in here. Look up in the third deck in left field, up there near the back row. There's a sign on the seat. Cleared the fence at the 420 mark, and it's another 60 feet to that chair. You can walk out there in an hour and a half from home plate. The last thing you want to hear after a shot like that is the manager asks some stupid question like, what did you throw him? But sure enough, here he comes walking out to the mound. What did you throw him, Lefty? McCarthy asked. The best pitch of my life for the first 60 feet, Gomez quipped. I had him fooled until he swung. That remark cost me $100. They sent me to Binghamton. This was after the war years, and he was player-manager there. We clinched last place on opening day. We had a heck of a streak. We lost 14 straight. If we got rained out, we had a victory dinner. I had a pitcher from Maine who couldn't get the signals down, so we kept it simple. One finger was a fastball and 2 fingers was a curve. The bases were loaded, with nobody out. When I called him in, I told him again, 1 finger is a fastball and 2 fingers is a curve. That's all you'll need. We won't worry about any other pitches. His first pitch is in the dirt, goes all the way to the screen, and a run scores. His next 3 are bouncing all around the plate, and my catcher's taking a beating. Then he strikes out the next batter in 3 pitches, the next one 2, and the next. He strikes out the side. When he comes into the dugout, I ask him what happened in the first 4 pitches. I'm sure glad you called for that 2-fingered ball because I can't control that thing with just 1 finger. I got a double once and took a foot lead and got picked off. When the manager asked me what happened, I said, I'm not used to being out there. Once I picked a runner off first base. I picked off the first baseman, too. I hit him in the chest with my throw. He yelled, balk. And then he began his lecture, or his talk, on that Thursday evening. He paid a nice compliment to me. He said he'd spent the morning at the ballpark, and the afternoon he had a wonderful time at my house, reminiscing and looking at old baseball materials. I had some old Sporting Newses there, which he had back in the early 30s, where his picture's on the front page. I looked at some of those, and I showed him my 1927 scrapbook and a few other things. He made some nice remarks about how much he enjoyed that time here. And then he said he apologized also for not showing up last year. You know, he was the guest speaker for the NCAA Division III World Series last year here in Marietta. But at the last moment, we were in Florida when this happened, he got ill and couldn't make it. And I got back just the week of the series, and I didn't know he wouldn't be able to make it until I got back from Florida, because I was scheduled to interview him then, and that had to be postponed a year. But the reason was he had to undergo triple bypass heart surgery at that time, so he was unable to make it here in 1981. But when he began his talk on this Thursday night, June 3rd, 1982, in the Sternwheeler room of the Lafayette Hotel in Marietta, he said, I want to apologize for not being here last year, but the last moment I had triple bypass heart surgery. He says, you know, it's the only triple I've ever got. So it was a great interview, and he gave a great talk on to the people gathered at that banquet. And, oh yes, he says the record is incorrect in the daguerreotypes and other books that have his lifetime records in them. As far as his birthday is concerned, it's listed here in the daguerreotypes, born November 26, 1910, and he says that's wrong. It's 1908. He was 2 years older, so he's going to be 74 this November, where I was under the impression he was 70. He would be 72 this November, so he's actually 73 now. I guess that's about it. That winds up the interview. Not quite an hour and a half, but he took his responsibilities very seriously by going out to the ballpark and seeing all the managers of the coaches of the 6 teams that were there and all the players in the teams and talking with them. And actually, he was out there in the morning, and I went over to meet him in the Lafayette late in the morning to plan what we were going to do, and he didn't get back to about 11:30. And I'd been waiting almost an hour by that time. And he apologized for his lateness, but said he was out at the ballpark and was going to have to go out again. And I said what I would like to do. I'd like to have him for a couple hours for an interview. And so he said, well, how about 2:30 this afternoon? So I came back over 2:30 in the afternoon, picked him up, and brought him over to the house here for the interview, and then drove him back to the hotel after the interview was over. I think he went out to the ballpark again, and I did talk to him and his friend Al later that evening, just before the banquet when we were gathering in the Sternliga room. A very good interview, although I think it could have been a little bit longer.